My name is Marisol Vega, and the night my mother shattered my collarbone with a cast iron skillet, she did it because I refused to wash her boyfriend's son's dirt bike before his birthday party. I was 19. I left that house in Toledo with $4 crumpled in my back pocket, one flip-flop that didn't match the other, and a phone that died before I made it to the bus stop. My mother locked the deadbolt behind me. She never called. She never texted. She told the neighbors I'd run off with a boy. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already started building the thing that would burn her whole little kingdom to the ground. Before I go any further, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to see how far this story travels. You ready? Then let me start at the dinner that ended everything. I used to think dinner was the only safe hour in that house. Not because it was peaceful. Nothing in that house was peaceful. But because for 45 minutes my mother had to perform. She put out the cloth napkins her sister sent from Phoenix, the ones with the little embroidered sunflowers, and she'd pretend we were the kind of family that prayed before we ate. We weren't. We were the kind of family where I learned to eat fast and quiet, where I learned to anticipate the slap of a screen door before it landed. But for that 1 hour, with the napkins out and the lamp dimmed, I could almost pretend. That Tuesday, I'd made meatloaf. Cheap ground beef from the Aldi off Monroe Street, ketchup glaze on top, mashed potatoes from a box because we couldn't afford the real ones that week. I set 4 places at the table even though only 3 of us actually lived there. The 4th was for Derek, my mother's boyfriend's son, 22, who showed up most nights to eat for free and leave his cleat marks on the carpet. Derek had a job at a tire shop in Maumee, but spent his paychecks on energy drinks and dirt bike parts. My mother called him such a sweet boy. She called me Moody. He walked in that night smelling like motor oil and Axe body spray, didn't take his boots off. My mother lit up like he was her actual blood. Marisol, get him a plate, baby. He's been working all day. I was already standing. I'd already cut him the biggest piece. I set it down in front of him, and he didn't look up from his phone. His father, Lyle, sat down across from him, cracked open a Bud Light, and started complaining about the Browns. My mother slid into her chair last, smoothing her hair back like she was on a date. I sat down too, just for a second, just to eat the food I'd cooked. "Did anyone tell you to sit?" my mother said. I looked at her. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Lyle, gauging him, waiting for him to notice she was performing. He did. He always did. He set the beer down slow. "Mom, I'm just gonna eat real quick." "You don't eat till the men eat." She said it flat, like she was reading it off a card. How many times? How many times, Marisol? Derek snorted without looking up from TikTok. Damn, cold. Lyle reached out and tapped his son's arm. "Hey, his bike. Tell her." Derek finally lifted his head. He smiled at me the way you smile at a dog that's about to do a trick. "Yeah, so Saturday's my birthday. I need the dirt bike washed and waxed by then. Tires, chain, the whole thing. There's stuff in the garage." I just stared at him. I was so tired. I had a double shift at the diner the next morning. I'd been saving for community college for 14 months. I had $212 in a sock under my mattress and a binder full of FAFSA paperwork I'd been too scared to mail. "I'm working Saturday," I said. "So do it Friday night." "I work Friday night too." Lyle leaned forward. "You hear yourself. He's family. You do it for family." I looked at my mother. I don't know what I was looking for. Some flicker. Some leftover piece of the woman who used to braid my hair before kindergarten, who used to slip extra cherries into my lunchbox. I didn't find her. "I haven't found her in a long time." "He has hands," I said. "He can wash his own bike." The room went so quiet I could hear the fridge humming. My mother set her fork down with a click that sounded like a gun being cocked. She stood up, walked into the kitchen. I thought she was going to get a glass of water and calm down. I really did. That's how stupid I still was. She came back with the skillet. I didn't even have time to stand. The first swing caught me on the shoulder and I felt something inside me give, like a wet branch breaking. The second one she meant for my face, but I got my arm up and the cast iron came down on my forearm and I heard myself make a sound I'd never made before. Somewhere far away, Derek was laughing. Lyle was yelling, but not at her, at me. Get up! Get up, you dramatic little— She grabbed a handful of my hair and walked me to the front door like that. Bent over, crying. My collarbone screaming. She opened the door and threw me out onto the concrete step and I landed raw on my hip and one of my flip-flops slid off into the bushes. You think you're too good to serve this family, she said. She was breathing hard. Her mascara was running, but her voice wasn't. Then you don't live in this family. Go on. Go find somewhere else. Mom, my phone, my stuff, your stuff is mine. I bought every stitch of it. Mom, please, I have work in the morning. She slammed the door. I heard the deadbolt. I heard her laugh, actually laugh on the other side of it, like she'd told a joke. I sat on the step for I don't know how long. 5 minutes. 20. The porch light flicked on automatic, then off, then on again, every time I shifted my weight. My right arm wouldn't lift past my belly button. My hip was bleeding through my jeans. My phone was dead in my pocket. I had $4.73 because I'd cashed my tip jar that afternoon and forgotten to hide it from her. I started walking. I don't even remember deciding to. I just stood up and the porch was behind me, and then it was a block behind me, and then it was gone. Toledo in October is not a kind city after dark. The wind comes off the lake and finds every hole in your clothes. I had on a Walmart t-shirt and jeans with a hole in the knee and one flip-flop and a sock. I walked with my arm pressed against my stomach because every step pulled at my shoulder. I passed a marathon station. I passed a Family Dollar with the lights off. I passed a Catholic church and tried the door, but it was locked because of course it was locked, because nothing in this country is open when you actually need it. I ended up at a bus stop on Detroit Avenue across from a payday loan place. There was a kid, maybe 16, smoking under the shelter, and he took one look at me and walked off. I sat down on the bench and put my head between my knees, and I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I did not cry. I was past crying. I was somewhere quieter than that. I was somewhere where I was just watching myself, like I was a story happening to somebody else. I thought about going to the hospital. I really did. ProMedica Toledo was maybe 2 miles east. I could walk it. But then what? I had no insurance. My mother had dropped me off hers the day I turned 18 because she said I was an adult now. I'd seen the bills my coworker Tasha got after her appendix, $12,000. They were garnishing her wages. I thought about going to the police, but I'd watched my cousin go through that 2 years back with her husband. And the officer had said, "Ma'am, did he leave a mark we can photograph?" And she'd said yes, and they'd taken her statement, and 3 weeks later the case was dropped because she didn't have a witness. My witness was Derek. My witness was Lyle. My witness was the woman who threw me out. So I sat on that bench, and around 2 in the morning, a woman sat down next to me. She was older. 60s, maybe early 70s. Black hair going silver at the temples, pulled back in a single braid. She had on a cart jacket 2 sizes too big, and she was carrying a thermos and a paper grocery bag. She didn't look at me at first. She just sat down at the other end of the bench like she was waiting for a bus that wasn't coming. After a minute, she said, "You been out here long, honey?" I didn't answer. I'd been raised not to talk to strangers, and somehow, even now, with everything that had happened, the rule held. She nodded like I had answered. She unscrewed the thermos and poured something into the lid. Coffee. The smell of it almost made me cry for real this time. "I'm Carmen," she said. "Carmen De La Rosa. I drive nights for a delivery company. I see a lot of folks at this bus stop." She held out the lid. "You don't gotta take it. But it's gonna be a cold one tonight, and that arm of yours don't look right." I took it. My hand was shaking so bad I almost spilled it. She watched me drink. "You got somewhere to go?" I shook my head. "You got somebody who'll come get you?" I shook my head again. She was quiet for a long time. She pulled a granola bar out of her grocery bag and set it on the bench between us. Then she pulled out a piece of paper and a pen and wrote something down. "There's a women's shelter on Sherry Street. They got beds. They won't ask you a lot of questions. Tell them Carmen sent you. They know me there." She tore the paper, handed me half. "And this is my number. You ever need a ride somewhere, you call me, day or night." I mean it. I've been where you are, child. I was 19 once, too, and somebody put me on a bus to Detroit with a busted lip and $40, and I didn't have a Carmen. So now I'm somebody's Carmen. You understand me? I nodded. I couldn't speak. She stood up. She left the thermos on the bench. "Keep it. Bring it back when you're on your feet. I'll be at this stop most Tuesdays." And she walked off into the dark like she'd never been there at all. The shelter on Cherry Street had a fluorescent buzz and a woman at the desk named Yolanda who looked at my shoulder and immediately picked up the phone. They drove me to ProMedica. I told the intake nurse I'd fallen down the basement stairs. She didn't believe me. I could see it on her face, but she also didn't push. She just wrote it down and told me my collarbone was fractured but not displaced, and my forearm was bruised to the bone, but not broken, and that I'd need a sling for 6 weeks and I'd need to follow up with an orthopedist, and I said okay and didn't tell her I had no money and no insurance and no way to follow up with anything. The hospital's social worker came in before discharge and slid a stack of paperwork across the bed. Medicaid emergency enrollment. Victim of crime fund. A pamphlet for legal aid. She didn't say a word about what had happened. She just said, "Fill these out, all of them, and eat the sandwich, please." There was a turkey sandwich on the tray. I hadn't seen it. I ate it in 4 bites. The shelter let me stay 2 weeks. That's the max. In those 2 weeks, I did 4 things. I filed for Medicaid. I called my manager at the diner and told her I'd had an accident, and she said she'd hold my job 2 weeks, but no more. I cashed my last paycheck at a check cashing place that took 8%, and I had $341 to my name. And I started writing. I'd always written, since I was a kid. Notebooks under the bed, journals shoved behind the dresser. The kind of writing that wasn't for anybody, just for me. Just to get the static out of my head. In the shelter, I didn't have a notebook, so I wrote on the back of intake forms and on napkins from the cafeteria and once on a paper plate. I wrote down what she'd said. I wrote down what she'd said. I wrote down what he'd said. I wrote down what the deadbolt had sounded like. I wrote down the way the cast iron had felt against my collarbone, which was less like pain and more like an idea. The idea that the woman who made you can also unmake you, and that there's no law against it. Not really. Not the kind that protects you in time. The shelter helped me find a room, $300 a month, shared kitchen, shared bathroom, in a house off Bancroft Street owned by a retired postal worker named Mrs. Petrov, who only rented to women. I moved in with a duffel bag of clothes from the shelter donation closet and the thermos Carmen had given me, which I'd washed and kept on the windowsill. Mrs. Petrov took one look at my sling and said, "First month's on the house. You pay me when you can." I tried to argue. She held up a hand. "I had a daughter. She didn't make it out. You make it out. That's the rent." I went back to the diner. I worked one-armed. I bussed tables with my left hand. My tips dropped. I cried in the walk-in cooler twice a week. But I worked. And every night I came home and I wrote. Not stories, letters. Hundreds of letters to my mother, to Lyle, to Derek, to my younger self, to the woman I might become. I never sent any of them. I just wrote them and stacked them in a shoebox under my twin bed. After 3 months, Carmen showed up at the diner. She slid into a booth at the counter and ordered black coffee and said, "Thought I'd find you here eventually." I served her with my left hand. She watched me. When my shift ended, she said, "Come sit with me." I sat. She said, "What are you doing with your nights?" I told her about the letters. She was quiet for a long minute. Then she said, "My niece runs a writing workshop. Free, out of the library on Sylvania Avenue. Tuesday nights. You should go." I went the next Tuesday. The workshop was 8 people, mostly women, all of them older than me, all of them older than me, all of them carrying something. The The teacher was Carmen's niece, a woman named Inez who taught composition at Owens Community College during the day. She made us read our work out loud. The first time I read a letter, one of the milder ones, the one to my younger self, there were 3 women crying by the end. Inez didn't say good or bad. She just said, read it again, slower this time. I went every Tuesday for a year and a half. In that time, a lot of things happened that you should know about. I enrolled at Owens part-time on a Pell Grant. The FAFSA paperwork I'd been too scared to mail before. I mailed it from the shelter and it had come back approved. I switched from the diner to a job at a public library, shelving books, $12 an hour, quieter, easier on my shoulder. I saved. I moved out of Mrs. Petrov's into a studio apartment above a tax office on Sylvania, $450 a month, my own bathroom, a window that faced east. Carmen came over for tea sometimes. She'd bring me sourdough from a Mexican bakery on Broadway, and we'd sit by the window and not say much. She told me once that grief is just love with nowhere to go, and that anger is grief with somewhere to go, and that writing was the difference between the two. I never called my mother. She never called me. Once, 8 months in, my cousin texted me that my mother had told the family I was on drugs in Detroit. I didn't respond. I screenshot the text and put it in the shoebox. In my second year at Owens, Inez asked if she could submit one of my letters to a literary magazine she edited. It was a small one, regional, maybe 2,000 subscribers. The letter was the one I'd written to my mother 3 weeks after the Skillet, the one where I described the meatloaf, the napkins, the sound of the deadbolt. Inez had been after me for months to let her submit something. I said yes finally because I was tired of saying no. The magazine printed it, a blog reprinted it, then a bigger blog reprinted it. Then a producer at a public radio station in Cleveland called and asked if she could read it on air. Then a literary agent in New York emailed me and said she'd been forwarded the piece by 3 different friends and could we talk. I want to be careful here. I want to be honest. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen like a movie. The agent and I worked on a proposal for 14 months. I rewrote the opening chapter 6 times. I cried over edits. I almost quit twice. I worked at the library the entire time. I was 23 when the book sold to a small but respected press in Brooklyn for an advance that was enough to pay off my Owens loans and put first and last on a 1-bedroom. The book was called Letters I Never Mailed. It came out the spring I turned 24. The book did better than anybody expected. Not bestseller list better, but the kind of better where libraries in 3 states ordered copies and a women's studies professor at Bowling Green put it on her syllabus, and the Toledo Blade wrote a piece about a local author whose memoir was getting national attention. The Blade ran a photo of me. It was a good photo. I was sitting in the library where I worked, holding the book, smiling like I meant it. My mother saw the photo. I know because she showed up at my book event 2 months later. The event was at a bookstore on Adams Street downtown. About 60 people. Carmen was there in the front row in her Carhartt jacket. Mrs. Petrov was there. Inez was there. The woman from the shelter, Yolanda, was there. Tasha from the diner. My manager from the library. I was reading the chapter about the bus stop when I saw my mother slip in the back. She dyed her hair. She had on the church coat she only wore for funerals. She was standing very still by the door. Lyle wasn't with her. I learned later he'd left her 18 months prior for a woman from his bowling league. Derek had been arrested for possession with intent to distribute and was doing 18 months in Allen County. She waited until the Q&A. She raised her hand. She was crying before I even called on her. The bookstore got very quiet. I could feel everybody recognizing her even though they didn't know who she was. There's something a room does when a story walks in. I just want to say, she said, I just want to say that I'm so proud of my daughter. And whatever she remembers, whatever happened, families work things out, and I'm here. I'm here for her. I waited. I let her stand there. I let the silence stretch until I could feel the whole room understand it. Then I said, I appreciate you coming. I do. But this isn't a reconciliation. This is a reading. She opened her mouth. I don't owe you a scene, I said. I already wrote you one. It's on page 47. You can buy a copy at the table on your way out." A woman in the third row laughed, then another one, then most of the room laughed, then another one, then most of the room. It wasn't cruel laughter. It was something else. It was the kind of laughter that happens when a room watches somebody refuse to flinch. My mother stood there for another second. Then she turned and walked out. The door chimed behind her. Carmen reached across her chair and squeezed my hand. A woman from the audience stood up next, older than my mother. She had a copy of my book pressed against her chest. She said, "I want to ask, what would you say to a woman who's still in it, who hasn't left yet?" I thought about it. I thought about it for a long time. The room waited. "I'd say there's a Carmen out there for you," I said. "Somewhere. At a bus stop or a checkout line or a hospital waiting room. And when she shows up, you take the coffee. Even if your hand is shaking. Even if you don't believe you deserve it. You take the coffee." That's how it starts. I drove home that night past the house on Detroit Avenue where I used to live. The porch light was on. The bushes where my flip-flop had landed were still there. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just looked at it the way you look at a place you used to be from. Not a place you're going back to. A letter came in the mail a month later. No return address. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. It said, "Marisol, I read your book. I don't know what to say. I was raised the way I raised you, maybe harder. I'm 62 and I'm alone and I'm sorry. Call me if you want. Don't if you don't, Mom." I read it twice. I folded it. I put it in the shoebox with all the others. That shoebox sits on the top shelf of my closet now. It's the only thing I took with me when I moved into the new place last fall. A small house on a quiet street in West Toledo. The first thing I've ever owned. Paid for with the second book's advance and a mortgage. I'm slowly chewing through. The thermos is on the kitchen windowsill. Carmen comes for Sunday breakfast every other week. She's 73 and still drives nights, though her niece keeps trying to get her to quit. I'm working on a third book. It's about Carmen, mostly. About what it means to be somebody's somebody at the exact moment they need a stranger to be human. I haven't told her yet. I want to surprise her with the dedication. People ask me sometimes if I forgave my mother. The answer is no. Forgiveness is something you give to people who've earned the right to be in your life, and she hasn't earned that. But I don't carry her anymore. There's a difference. I carried her for a long time in my shoulder and my jaw, and the way I flinched when men raised their voices. I don't carry her anymore. She's a chapter. She's not the book. The last thing I want to tell you is this. The night she threw me out, she thought she was teaching me a lesson about my place. She thought she was reminding me what I was worth. She thought I'd come crawling back within a week. Hungry and humbled, and she'd take me in with the kind of conditional mercy she'd raised me on, and the whole thing would reset, and I'd serve Derek his birthday cake and wash his bike and learn to keep my mouth shut. She raised me like I was furniture she could rearrange. So I walked out of the house and I built my own, and every brick of it is something she couldn't reach. I'm still here. I was never gone. When I look back at that Tuesday night in Toledo, I don't see a tragedy. I see a ledger. Every cruelty my mother spent on me, every silence Lyle traded for a free dinner, every smirk Derek wore while a woman crumpled in front of him on the kitchen floor, those were withdrawals. They were spending something they hadn't earned, and somewhere a balance was being kept, not by a god, not by fate, by the simple, mechanical truth that what you put into the world circles back to your own front door eventually. My mother lost Lyle to a woman from his bowling league. Derek lost 18 months of his life to a county lockup. She sits in that house on Detroit Avenue alone now, and the silence she chose for me is the silence she lives in. I didn't have to do anything to her. I just had to stop being the thing she used to drown out her own emptiness. But the other side of the ledger matters more. Carmen sat down on that bench at 2 a.m. and handed me a thermos because 30 years earlier somebody hadn't handed her one, and she'd decided to be the person she'd needed. Mrs. Petrov gave me a free month because her daughter hadn't made it out, and she'd decided to make sure another girl did. Inez stayed late after workshop because somebody had stayed late for her once. That's how it works. Kindness is debt that pays forward, and cruelty is debt that comes due. You get to choose which ledger you write yourself into. The thing I want you to understand, if you take anything from my story, is that walking out of that house with $4 was not bravery. I want to be honest about that. It was the only door left. The real work happened later, alone in a 12 by 12 room with a draft under the window where nobody was watching and nobody would have known if I'd given up. The real work was writing letters nobody would read. The real work was showing up to a workshop with a sling on my arm and reading my pain out loud to strangers. The real work was choosing every single morning to believe I was worth something when the woman who made me had told me my whole life that I wasn't. That belief that you are worth the work it takes to build a life is not given to you. Your mother does not hand it to you. The world does not hand it to you. You build it the way you build anything decent, with your own two hands, in the dark, over years, while nobody claps. And one day you look up and there's a house around you that nobody can take because you laid every brick yourself. I am not special. I am not chosen. I am a girl from Toledo with a fractured collarbone and a thermos on her windowsill. If I could do this, the woman watching this right now can do it too. You take the coffee. You write the letter. You show up. The rest comes.